the beloved sales promotion. Yes? We are bedeviled by it in this country, are we not? The old fat white men that run most of our businesses are sales driven. Yes? That's what they are. And that's not to say a sales promotion is not a good thing every now and again. The problem with sales promotions is they are the heroin of marketing. Yes? The first time you do heroin, I would imagine, it's fantastic. Yes? The problem is the second, third, fourth, and fifth times, and as you become addicted to it, your life falls apart. In the same way, the first sales promotion is fantastic, a sudden surge of traffic just when you need it. The problem, of course, is the sudden surge of traffic begins to commodify the brand, which gets rid of the traffic, which means you need another sales promotion, which means you begin to commoditize the brand. And you keep going down this vicious cycle, and before you know it, your river's advertising $3 sandals on Channel 7 that make no sense to man or woman. Yeah? All I see in Australia is people writing fucking pages and pages of triangles and circles and rhomboids filled with horseshit and more horseshit about what the brand stands for, fucking trust and all that. It's rubbish. Positioning is deeply fucked up right now. No, it is. It really is. And it's fucked up because we have two very smart and equally brilliant people pulling you all in two completely different directions. On the one hand, we got Jim Stengel, who used to run P&G's marketing, which means he's pretty much next to God in terms of marketing seniority. And then down below in the dirt, scratching around, is Professor Byron Sharp with his brilliant book, How Brands Grow. And I don't say that because it's a dirty book. I say it because Byron is incredibly realistic and incredibly prosaic about what brands can really do. I find myself in the middle. I find myself to take a lot from Sharp's work, and particularly, as you'll see later, of assets and distinctive assets. Stengel's stuff is very high in the heavens for me, but I believe you can also position. But the world of positioning is in massive flux at the moment. You've all seen completely standardized, generic shit advertising, okay? I'm not saying this is bad for the brand, I'm just saying it's category advertising, right? You get a guy that no one hates, Roger Federer, right? No one is inspired by Roger Federer. If you came up to me after and said, I'm inspired by Roger Federer, I'd say, you're fucking crazy, get out of here, right? He's thoroughly 5 on any 10-point scale, right? Delightful, lovely man. I love to. Next door neighbor, terrific. There's Roger. How you going, Roger? Nice to see you, mate. How you going? Does he inspire me? Not at all. He's a lovely, boring guy, right? Someone with low negatives, right? Again, roll up his sleeve, go, hey, look at me, I've got the watch on. That's it. That's the formula of the category. And it happens again and again and again forever. That's how you sell a watch, if you think you're part of the watch category. Now, let's get on to the nitty-gritty. And here we are in Australia, a codeless fucking country, yeah? Photographs, last week, 4 of the leading fashion brands of Australia. Which is which? I've obviously taken out the logos. Let me give you some help. It's one of those. Okay, here's the answers. No? No, I'm fucking with you. No, I'm still fucking with you. You don't fucking know and neither do I. Nobody knows. They all look the same. There's only one brand in Australia, in my opinion, that is a visual merchandising champion. Anyone recognize this boutique? He's a fucking genius, right? And if we were in any country except Australia where no one appreciates geniuses like him, if he was a Frenchman, he would be celebrated, streets would be named after him. He's a brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur and visual merchandiser. Too many brands suckling at the corporate teat will kill everything. That's the story of Australian branding. Learn to kill. Moronic brand consultants create brands for companies. I come along with a big fucking kitchen knife and I kill them. You know why? Because everybody makes more money at the end of that. Yeah? Learn to kill. Killing is good. No, killing is good. These are not people, these are brands. Kill them. Kill as many as you can and focus your organization because everyone's doing it, apparently, except Australian companies.
Welcome to the third lecture, which is titled Brand Management, Dropping the Stupid Stuff That Holds Back Australian Brands. Despite Mark's recent notoriety with our first lecture on marketing communications and the traditional digital media divide, he's actually spent the better part of the last 20 years focusing almost exclusively on brand strategy. He's taught brand management on the MBA courses of London Business School, MIT, and in Australia at the Melbourne Business School. He's written articles in the Harvard Business Review, among others, on brand strategy, as well as his long-running, prize-winning turn as columnist for Britain's Marketing Week. But most important, and the reason we wanted him to headline this series, is that he's worked for some of the world's biggest brands at the highest possible levels. He's not just lectured and written about it, he's practiced what he's preached. His client list is a who's who of big brands over the last 2 decades, including Louis Vuitton, Adidas, J&J, PepsiCo, McKinsey, Dom Perignon, Benefit, HSBC, Jolique, Unilever, and the list goes on. And always hired by the CEO. Until, of course, the recent arrival of his new baby daughter only a few weeks ago, most of those assignments were overseas and he's now grounded. So this session wraps up the Marketing Deconstructed series for this year. And we've asked Mark to look at what he's learned from the biggest brands over the last 20 years and what he would encourage us to do here to build stronger brands. Please welcome Mark Ritson.
Hello everyone, lovely to be back here for a final tryst. So in this last session, as Sunita says, let's look at some of the experiences I've had. And not really what I've done per se, but what I've learned from some of the great marketing people and some of the big brands around the world that I've been lucky enough to work for. And a reminder that we didn't want to reinvent marketing. Too many plonkers have already tried to do that. The purpose of this session wasn't to create new things, but quite the opposite, but to try and break them back down to their fundamentals. And that's the brief that I've worked off for this session, is just to go back to distilling out what are the core lessons and frankly getting rid of a lot of the ephemeral stuff that we don't need when we turn our attention to actual branding. And so I've picked 6 or 7 concepts, and each one of them I feel is important to building brand, and one way or another is an area of challenge and weakness for us here in Australia. Not because we're not good, but because competition has come relatively late to our door. We're catching up fast, and I think these are the 6 or 7 things I would will for you as you go forward into the brand building challenges of the next 10 years. So let's start with brand heritage. It's a cliche, but it's a very important cliche, and an interesting question. Where does the word brand come from? Does anybody know? What language? Not German. Older. Not Latin, it would be Mark, interestingly, if that was the language of... What's older than Latin? Logos, if it was Greek. So there aren't many left to go. It's Viking, it's Norse, Old Norse, ancient Norse. The word brand, brandia, means to burn. And it means to burn the mark of a creator onto a product that says, I made this in a certain place and at a certain time. Now, at some point, some unnamed Viking burned a T or an S onto a sword or a cow to say, basically, this is my fucking cow, don't steal it. But over time, that signal of ownership became associated with certain cows or certain swords being better than others, and it passed into this world of consumer-based benefits that we live in today. So this concept of brand origin and heritage is super important, and it's one we struggle with here in Australia. So here we are in New South Wales. There can be no more appropriate picture than this. This is inarguably one of the most famous teams in this part of the world. This is, of course, the New South Wales Blues, the State of Origin Rugby League team. Interesting trivia question for you. Who's the current sponsor of the New South Wales rugby team? Anyone know? Give you a clue. It's VB, Victoria Bitter. Now, does that make any fucking sense to you? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. And again, this is complex stuff, right? Again, I apologize. I have a PhD in marketing, so I'll go through this gently. So let me take you through my thesis, okay? So here's a picture of Australia for those not familiar with it. See that there? That would be Victoria, which is where Victoria Bitter comes from, okay? And that there, that's actually called New South Wales. That would be where the New South Wales rugby team comes from. And the idea that one state origin would sponsor another is ludicrous, particularly when the name of the contest is State of Origin, right? I understand why VB wants to target people in New South Wales, but doing so with the State of Origin New South Wales team makes a mockery of brand heritage. Now, if this was one isolated example, we'd say, okay, but it isn't. There's tons of them. I don't know, let's choose, what do you want to do? Let's go across codes. How about Hawthorn Football Club, yeah? Anyone know who the sponsors of Hawthorn Football Club are? Not Bupa, no, funnily enough, no, that would make complete fucking sense. No, we're not going to go that way, no. No, it's not Bupa. It's Tasmania. That's right. The state of Tasmania sponsors the Hawthorn Football Club. So again, just to help you out with this complex theory, that would be where Hawthorn is, and that is Tasmania, the official sponsor of the Hawthorn Football Club, and that would be Tasmania there. It doesn't make any fucking sense at all. At all. I think we have an issue with brand heritage and brand origin, and it gets terribly in the way. I'll give you another example. Speedo. Anyone aware? You're aware. This is an Aussie brand originally, right? Everyone's aware of that, right? Where does Speedo come from? Bondi. Could you think of a better fucking place on the planet for a swimwear brand to come from? Yeah? Bondi Beach. You literally couldn't find a better spot on earth to create a brand like Speedo. Why don't they make anything of it? Because they're Australian, or they were originally. And to do so would break some kind of hidden rule about brand origin that doesn't make any sense to me. Bunnings are about to go on a major adventure into the United Kingdom, and they're going to use the Bunnings brand. But the only thing they're not going to do is ever mention one word, Australian. Don't mention Australia. Why? Because they're Australian. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You know, we have managed to never really play our source, our origin, or anything at local or national level. Throughout this period, Australia has featured in the top 5, top 3, top 10 country brand index. Now, I don't believe in country branding, but I'm going to believe in it for this section because it fits my argument. Australia is currently the number 8th ranked country brand in the world. We have extraordinary attractiveness in the Australian identity of our goods and services, but there's something stopping us from playing it. And that lack of brand heritage, I think, is a real weakness that we should somehow fix and turn around. Number 2, brand equity. So, when I was studying brand management a long time ago, I saw this quote, and it has stayed with me ever since. This is the late, great Al Eichenbaum, one of the great advertising thinkers of the 20th century. And Al's quote comes from the 1960s, but remarkably, I still think it beats the pants off anyone else's. And this is the definition of brand that I've sort of kept with me all this way. Eichenbaum says, what distinguishes a brand from an unbranded commodity counterpart and gives it its equity is the sum total of a consumer's perceptions and feelings about the product's attributes, about how it performs, about the brand name, and about the company associated with producing it. It is a spectacularly wonderful quote for a number of reasons. First, it was the first quote ever to talk about the equity of the brand, the value of the brand, which is at the center of everything we do in brand management if you know what you're doing. Second, it sets up an absolutely crucial contrast between a brand and a commodity, which, as you'll see in a second, is the key to unlocking the brand equity construct. And finally, look at Eichenbaum's definition of what drives brand. Way ahead of his time, it's everything, literally everything. So it's a lovely quote, and I therefore stole it many years ago and used it as the basis for my slightly more colorful, animated definition of brand, but basically ripped off Eichenbaum. So to understand a brand, I think you should create a continuum between 2 extreme points. On one end of the continuum, we need to create brands, or locate strong brands. At the other end of the continuum, we should put the opposite of a brand, which is a commodity. Now, we know lots about commodities here in Australia, yeah? We know about uranium and coal and oil and so on. But the reality is anything can be a commodity. If you pay a price for it and it does a job for you, it's a commodity. Now, brands, we also pay money for them, and they also do a job for us, but they have a third feature. And the third feature is all important. Brands mean things to customers. They stand for things. Over and above their performance and their simple price, they stand for and represent things to the consumers that buy them. And it's meaning that maketh the brand. And when you see it that way, you can begin to understand how brands are built. This handsome man, for example, is Louis Vuitton. Not the brand. This is Louis Vuitton, the founder, the mustachioed champion of France. And when Monsieur Vuitton started his business more than 150 years ago, he had no interest in brands. He was making commodities. He was making wooden boxes, and there isn't much more of a commodity than that. And if you'd have been traveling around the colony of Australia 150 years ago, you'd have been traveling around with something like this. And it would have been domed because it's made from wood. and therefore not quite waterproof. And the dome is designed to let the water run off the top. When Monsieur Vuitton arrived with his disruptive innovation, he created the iPad of his day, which was the flat, stackable trunk. This was it. This was high tech. And the reason it was high tech is you could stack them on top of each other. And the reason you could do that is Mr. Vuitton put leather around the wood. And when others copied him, he put his monogram on the leather to say, this is a Louis Vuitton trunk. And this is how the business begins. Now, there's still no real focus on brand of any kind. It's still commodity, beautiful commodity trunks. But over time, these trunks mark the time of travel. Throughout the late 19th and 20th century, if anyone went anywhere luxuriously, they went with Vuitton. And over time, first by accident and then more and more deliberately, Louis Vuitton picked up two very important associations: luxury and travel. First by accident and later by design. And today, that's what Vuitton has. It's far more important than the trunk business. It's to have those associations, to have that brand equity front and center. So now we see how brands are built, yeah? Anything which takes you from the commodity offer towards the meanings you want to stand for in the mind of the consumer is fundamentally brand building. Now, we talk about advertising as the brand building tool. It's true. Back in the day, this was an attempt by Apple to associate their brand with Nelson Mandela, and literally a very brutal piece of association. Yeah, that's all ads are, sometimes a frame. But don't focus on advertising. Anything which communicates the meanings you want to stand for to your consumers is inherently brand building. If you have a splendid Uber experience with a friendly, non-smelly, non-sexual predator type driver, Uber is building its brand, yeah? And even weirdly, in some cases, if you're a very exclusive brand and a client comes in to buy the latest handbag and it's already sold out, that negative experience is actually a very strong, positive brand experience because the exclusivity is enforced and the desire doubled. So anything that creates and enforces the meanings you want to stand for is brand building. Now, the second reason we have to look at it on a continuum, however, is we also begin to glimpse how brands are broken, or to use the correct terminology, how they're commodified or commoditized. Anything that communicates meaning builds brand, and anything that contradicts it or is inconsistent begins to break it and send the brand back to its commodity form. As Apple looks more and more in its product form like Samsung, it's not different anymore, it's not creative, it's not unique, it's just another tech brand. As Uber hires more and more psychopaths, it begins to become increasingly similar to the other driving services on offer to you late at night. And ironically, in some cases, when clients come to buy the latest bag and we have it in stock, and in fact we have 6 of them in stock, or 15 of them in stock, and she catches a glimpse of the 15 in stock, suddenly the dream of the brand is destroyed, even though our supply chain is working perfectly. There's no rules here. Anything that is consistent with the brand builds brand, and anything that's inconsistent breaks it. Now, there is, of course, one other beloved Australian technique which breaks the brand even quicker, much faster than incongruity and inconsistency, and that's, of course, the beloved sales promotion. Yes? We are bedeviled by it in this country, are we not? The old fat white men that run most of our businesses are sales driven. Yes? That's what they are. And therefore, the sales promotion is a perfect and logical step to take as much as possible. Now, the problem with sales promotions, as you can now glimpse, is they are the ultimate commodity form. Because they say to the consumer, don't buy us what we stand for. Fuck that. Buy us because we're cheaper than we were last week. Buy us because I'll give you 2 for the price of 1. You will sell more. Your margins will be hurt. But even more invisibly, and more importantly, you begin to commodify the brand. And that's not to say a sales promotion is not a good thing every now and again. The problem with sales promotions is they are the heroin of marketing. Yes? The first time you do heroin, I would imagine, it's fantastic. Yes? The problem is the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th times, and as you become addicted to it, your life falls apart. In the same way, the first sales promotion is fantastic, a sudden surge of traffic just when you need it. The problem, of course, is the sudden surge of traffic begins to commodify the brand, which gets rid of the traffic, which means you need another sales promotion, which means you begin to commoditize the brand. And you keep going down this vicious cycle, and before you know it, your River's advertising $3 sandals on Channel 7 that make no sense to man or woman. Yeah? But the most important reason why we put brand and commodity together is because when you do that, you glimpse the secret of brand. Okay? Such a secret if it does exist. So take a brand, subtract from it a commodity, and whatever's left over, if there's anything left over at all, is the concept we call brand equity. That's how you work out what brand equity is. Let me give you a stupidly simple example, okay? Let's take a famous brand, Coca-Cola. Now, what's the commodity equivalent of Coca-Cola? Well, it's a can of cola, unbranded cola, right? That's the category generic equivalent. Take the cola out of Coke. Do it in your head right now. Take cola out of Coca-Cola, and what's left in your head? And what's left in your head is probably Christmas or summer or refreshment or overpriced or calories or whatever it might be, the jumble of associations that you have stored in your head about Coca-Cola. Could be positive, could be negative. This is the substance of brand. All those lost souls working on fucking consistent look and feel and fonts don't get this point, yeah? Brand managers, they do that. That's what they manage, that. Nothing tangible, all that shit with the websites and all that, it's all pointless. The Pantons, doesn't fucking matter. Change your Panton every week, nothing's gonna happen, yeah? This is the stuff of branding, okay? So it brings up an interesting question. Why don't we take your brand? Why don't you think about the generic equivalent of your brand? And why don't you imagine with your target customer performing that calculation? Now, it's not quite this simple. You can't just ask them. There are certain research techniques that need to be done. But in a nutshell, your brand minus commodity equals what in the head of your customer? Because I don't care what you think. You think it's innovation and integrity and all that other horseshit you've got in your pointless positioning statement. But that's not what the question's about. Everyone thinks they have a beautiful husband at home. The point is, what does the consumer think when we make that calculation? And now we get close to the pointy part. What does she think when we take the commodity out of the brand? And this should start a series of questions in your mind, which are the questions of brand. Do I have anything? Second, is it positive? Because every brand, no matter how wonderful, has negative and positive associations. And I'm always stunned when I look at brand research that only has positives. I'm like, where's all the negative shit? How much of this stuff, even if it's positive, is important to the consumer? How much of it correlates with purchase or switch or net promoter score? How much of all of these different attributes are actually worthwhile? And then finally, even if it's positive and even if it's correlated with purchase, do I own it more than the competitors, or am I coming fourth in this increasingly competitive country we live in? These are the questions of brand. And while still the majority of morons within this country that have a branding job are working on fonts and logos and Pantons and the consistent look and feel, the growing minority of more savvy brand managers are working on answering these questions. And the biggest one of all, what do I want it to be? If I think about my target consumer right now, walking down George Street, and if I imagine I had 3 brain cells, and you'll be very lucky if you've got 3, that I can drop 3 different associations into their head for my brand, what would I wish them to be? I wanted to know that I exist, and now I got 3 brain cells. What do I want her to think when she thinks of my brand? This is positioning. An army of morons have descended upon marketing and branding and told you that positioning is an end in itself. It's not. It's much more simple than that. Positioning is what you want those brain cells to hold if you do your job successfully. All of this shit means the same thing. Yeah? Charlatans and agencies and consultants have told you, oh no, you have to have a brand purpose next to your brand attributes in a triangle with your brand characteristics. And it's all because they're trying to sell you this stuff by the yard. It's all the fucking same. Yeah? Choose any you want. Make one up. It doesn't matter. The principle of positioning is the same. The 3 brain cells, what do you want to have in your positioning that hopefully will get into those brain cells? That's it. That's positioning. It was never meant to be complex. We've just bastardized it over the 40 years since the concept was first invented. So, look, many things I've told you during these sessions are completely guesstimates, estimates, made up bullshit. The one thing I can tell you I'm definitely an expert in, and there's only one thing, is this. I've worked on more big billion-dollar brands, actually doing the positioning work with the senior team than anyone else in Australia, I'll betcha. I'll betcha. And getting it wrong as much as getting it right, I promise, right? But the point is, this is what I have learned genuinely from doing that stuff in various different places. Positioning is not an end in itself. All I see in Australia is people writing fucking pages and pages of triangles and circles and rhomboids filled with horseshit and more horseshit about what the brand stands for, fucking trust and all that. It's rubbish, absolute rubbish. Positioning is not an end in itself. Positioning is a means to an end. And the means to the end is really very simple. It's brand equity. Positioning is the intended brand equity. Positioning is what I want to stand for, and if I do my job well, it's what she thinks I stand for at the end of my branding experience. What do you want those brain cells to say? That's what the positioning has to be. And when you see it that way, it's a lot easier to understand, but a lot harder to actually execute. You can call positioning whatever you like. Trust me, all these things, they mean the same thing. Call it whatever you need to call it for it to have organizational traction. But don't use too many constructs. In my experience, don't use more than one, or the thing starts to fall apart. Use as few concepts as possible. If you have two, like, you got your brand assets, and here's my brand purpose, it's already starting to vibrate and fall apart. You add a third thing, it's definitely fucked, yeah? Call it whatever you like, but come back to the simplicity of what do I want to stand for when my customer thinks about me? What do I want to mean, yeah? And then second, whatever construct you use as few attributes as possible. Now this is tricky because some of the brands you represent are complex, distinctive, difficult organizations. So you have to cover the corners of the brand, and this is tricky. You have to get all the magic in the bottle. But know that every single word or concept you add to your positioning halves the chance that it's going to get through into the heads and the hearts of your target customer. So be parsimonious. My stupid, simple restrictions, and I've worked mostly with French companies, so you can imagine how hard this might be, where eloquence is their stock and trade. A single concept and the maximum of 5 different attributes, hopefully a lot less, has worked. And the definition of worked is made fuckloads of money and tracked beautifully over many years. Positioning is deeply fucked up right now. No, it is. It really is. And it's fucked up because we have 2 very smart and equally brilliant people pulling you all in 2 completely different directions. On the one hand, we've got Jim Stengel, who used to run P&G's marketing, which means he's pretty much next to God in terms of marketing seniority. And Jim, in his wonderful book, Grow, talks about brand ideals, brand purpose, a business's essential reason for being, the higher order benefit it brings to the world. Yeah? This is at the high end, in the heavens of what brands can do. They can stand for much bigger, highfalutin concepts. And then down below in the dirt, scratching around, is Professor Byron Sharp with his brilliant book, How Brands Grow. And I don't say that because it's a dirty book. I say it because Byron is incredibly realistic and incredibly prosaic about what brands can really do. And I'll be honest with you, these 2 guys are both equally persuasive. And here's where it gets really fucked up. They both work for the same clients. They quote the same companies in their case studies of success. It's a deeply, deeply troubling situation. Professor Sharp doesn't believe in differentiation very often at all. He doesn't say it's impossible, but he says it's unlikely. He believes in distinctiveness, just in standing out, but really not standing for much at all. Rather than striving for meaningful perceived differentiation, marketers should seek meaningless distinctiveness. Sounds like my sex life in the 80s, yeah? Meaningless distinctiveness. There's no soul to it. There's no higher purpose. It just stands out and it gets recognized on the shelf where it's experienced. And these 2 stand at completely different poles, and you're going to have to manage it. I find myself in the middle. I find myself to take a lot from Sharp's work, and particularly, as you'll see later, of assets and distinctive assets. Stengel's stuff is very high in the heavens for me, but I believe you can also position. But the world of positioning is in massive flux at the moment. So let me share with you my favorite example of all time of positioning. The greatest I've ever seen. Hublot was a very famous but very niche watch brand. created in 1980 by a Swiss entrepreneur called Carlo Crocco. Carlo created a beautiful watch. And as you see, this is one of the early watches from the 1980s. You probably can't see it here, but it's 18 karat or 24 karat rose gold, beautiful gold, black face, and most unusually for the 80s, it has a rubber strap. Today it's very common to see rubber straps. Back then it was unheard of, especially on a watch that would cost $15,000 in today's money. And as you can see, Carlo's interest in the sea and diving and maritime stuff was expressed in his brand. Hublot means porthole. The watch itself resembles something nautical. And it was a lovely niche brand, and it bounced along, and if I had to guess, maybe 5 million euros a year. And then eventually Carlo wanted to retire. So he sold the brand to Jean-Claude Biver, the most famous watch entrepreneur of them all, a brilliant, brilliant man. And Mr. Biver decided he would work out the positioning of Hublot because he didn't want it to be a niche brand, he wanted to open it to everyone. Rather than me try and paraphrase Mr. Biver, listen carefully, this is positioning genius. He's going to come out with a single one-word positioning that's going to generate hundreds of millions of euros. I can't tell you how much, but many, many hundreds of millions of euros in sales each year from Hublot. Jean-Claude Biver.
Hublot came out with a product in 1980, a product that was based on an innovation to introduce rubber as a strap. It seems very common today, but rubber in 1980 was a real courageous move. It was even the provocation. People said, hey, on a gold watch, rubber? Because people didn't know rubber comes from a tree, rubber is natural, rubber is very comfortable, it's very flexible, and rubber is very resistant. And it's waterproof, so finally it's ideal for a watch. And then Hublot could not evolve. They stayed on a product. And I said, we are not a product. We have a message first. We have a concept. And the concept is fusion. Why? Because in 1980, when we put gold together with rubber, we created a fusion because gold and rubber never come together. They were together only one time in life during the Big Bang. Then everything was in one. And then rubber went away and said, okay, I go now on my tree. And gold said, okay, I go and rest in South Africa under the earth. And since then, they never met, till people take them and connect them. So I said, Hublot made a fusion. And fusion must be our message, must be our philosophy, must be our religion. And once we have this religion clear, and it is named fusion, then we can develop further products that not necessarily need rubber anymore, because fusion goes further away than just rubber. It can be carbon, it can be ceramic, whatever. So I was capable to free Hublot from the product and give Hublot a message. And from that message, new products were born. And the product that was born in July 2005, I named it Big Bang, not because it's a funny name, not because it's a strong name, not because it's the only name that has no translation, that every country, every language pronounce the same. I named it Big Bang because rubber and gold originally were just together in the Big Bang and later in Hublot. So Big Bang is a very normal name for that product because it explains finally what we are.
And so you get the ultimate in positioning, a one-word positioning statement. That's it. That's it. Now, we don't always get that lucky, yeah? We don't always find someone that clever and that insightful. I'm not saying we have to come up with one word. But every time we add more to our positions, they become less and less likely to work. The complexity is the enemy. This shit is what you must fight against, yeah? Many years ago, the best consulting gigs I ever got were in America. If a company spends more than $1 million on anything, procurement these days asks them to have it verified by an external expert. And I got on this little roadshow where you could go and like sign off and say, oh yeah, this is great work. And I got something like this once upon a time and had a massive Barney with the company because clearly this is shit, yeah? Clearly this is shit. It feels good when you're sitting in an office, But we're not the important ones. The service personnel that work in Telstra or work in Coles, these are the people that deliver the brand. They meet more customers than us in one day than we'll meet in a lifetime. These are the people. You try getting that into the head of someone that's working very hard for $12 an hour and you're going to get not very far. Similarly, this is the worst positioning I've ever seen in my travels. It comes from a company that you've heard of called MetLife. I'm not sure if they're still using it. I hope not. It's terrible, right? In my professional opinion, right? Why is it terrible? Well, MetLife had a positioning statement. And the positioning statement is, MetLife is a leading international provider of insurance and other financial products that endeavors to build financial freedom for our customers so they can focus on what matters most in life. There's sort of something there. It's a bit, it's a bit wordy. But they weren't finished. On top of the positioning statement, they added a series of values. People count, integrity and honesty. It's always fucking there. Innovation, also always fucking there. Financial strength, partnership, and personal responsibility. I'd argue none of those are of any value at all in differentiating. But anyway, there you go. We're just about at the point of implosion, right? I've got a statement and I got 6 values. Not done. Then they had a statement of purpose, to build financial freedom for everyone. And on top of that, they had a long-term goal, to become a recognized leader throughout the world for relationship building, connectedness, and caring in financial services in the giant league by the year 2010. And then someone else said, you know what, I think what we need are some core attributes. Some core attributes at the center here. Trustworthy, yes. Approachable and financially strong, yes, yes, yes. And then someone else said, you know what, if you got the core attributes, I think what you need here is you need some secondary attributes around them. Innovation, again, doubly innovative, yeah? And someone else said, you know what we need? We need like a theme to bring it all together. And someone else said, you know what would be really cool if we had like a web kind of learning brand center to explain to our befuddled team what the fuck all of this means, right? It only costs like $500,000. And someone else said, what we need is a brand glossary. A brand glossary, see? So we can explain all of this shit. There's only really 2 concepts. There's positioning, what we want to stand for, and there's the brand image that forms brand equity. That's it. We can do this, but we're going to hurt ourselves if we do. Remember the game of telephone? It's called Goose Goose in China. Le Téléphone Arabe in France, right? Remember how that used to be played when we were kids before they invented mobile phones and stuff? You'd stand in a playground in the rain, because I grew up in England, obviously, right? And you'd come up with a word, and then you'd whisper the word down the line, and the kid at the bottom would shout out the word. It's a perfect analogy for branding, yeah? You get some hot gun brand manager who wants 17 rhomboids and 400 words, right? But he doesn't get it, because he's not the one that has to deliver the service. We have that long line of people that go through our marketing team, into our retailers, into our service personnel. And the only people that matter, really, in terms of delivering the service, are way down the line. If we're starting with the super complex horseshit that makes us look good in the boardroom, it's never going to work down there where it really matters. Tightness is what we're after. So, on to brand execution. Let's have a tight position. Let's do brand execution. And for this, I'll need the help of George Clooney, who I believe is still the sexiest man in the world. But what would I know, okay? So, the reason everyone in this room finds George Clooney to be sexually attractive, male, female, gay, straight, it doesn't matter, everyone finds him to be attractive, is because of George Clooney's DNA. The DNA has given him the face, the hair, the looks, etc. Yeah? And yet, at no point will we ever see the actual DNA itself. It just makes George. If you follow that logic, positioning is the DNA. We're never going to get it out. You're never going to see the helical strands. It's going to be imbued through the experience, through the products, through the distribution, through the service, through everything that we do if we get it right. Execution becomes everything. And it's common in America to see this sign, what would Jesus do? And the point is, if you're a member of the Christian faith and you find yourself, I don't know, in a casino or a strip bar, I don't know what you'd be doing there because you remember the Christian faith, but go with me on this. You'd ask yourself, what would Jesus do? Presumably leave the strip bar, and you would follow that advice, right? Now, that's an entirely brilliant way of turning a philosophy into a behavior. Now, our bumper sticker reads, what would your brand position tell you to do? This is the challenge, getting smart people to not find an idiosyncratic solution, but to look at the positioning every time to come to the answer to the question. Consistency, in my experience here, is overrated. Yeah? Brands, and it's a cliche, but I'm going to use it anyway, brands are a disruptive thing. Brands break categories. They get a big fucking axe and go, nah, none of that, doing this instead. That's what brands are. They fundamentally mess up categories. They smash them up and do something uncomfortable with those categories. They don't even belong to the categories. Let me give you one of my favorite stories. I was lucky enough many years ago to work for the champagne brand called Krug. And there are many people, including me, that would argue it is literally the greatest wine brand in the world, not that they would use that language. And Krug did something very interesting a few years ago. They launched the 1989 vintage of their champagne ahead of their 1988 vintage. So they flipped the vintages. And they did that because the 88 wasn't ready and the 89 was, and they flipped them out of sequence. And they got a very polite letter from the Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée saying, hey, you can't do that, see, because you're not allowed. You can skip a vintage, but you can never alter the sequence. It's against the rules of champagne. And Henri Krug, who was the winemaker and great-great-grandson of the founder of Krug, delightful man, wrote the Appellation a wonderfully polite letter where he said, don't ever tell me again how to make Krug. You seem to be under the impression that we make champagne. We don't make champagne, we make Krug. And if I think we should, we're going to do it. Now, inside the DNA of Krug is things like being the maverick. It's the maverick brand of champagne. And pleasure beyond perfection. This is an entirely Krug story. And here you glimpse what brands truly do when they're proper brands, and there aren't many out there. They break the rules of the category in order to be true to their position. If I was going to write a book on branding, I'm certainly not, because it's a total fucking waste of time and there's no money in it, I would call that book Disruptively Consistent. And if it was a big hit, I'd write a sequel called Consistently Disruptive. Yeah? This is what I've learned from really amazing brands in execution, okay? In any great brand, there are two motions going on simultaneously. The first motion is, I'm looking at my brand position, which isn't some fucking rhomboid with 85 words in it. It's a tight set of things that I do, and I'm going to deliver that consistently. But to deliver it consistently, I am going to smash the fuck out of the category and break every rule. Not for the sake of it, not for chaos, but because my positioning demands that I play the game differently because I'm a brand and the category actually doesn't even exist. There's just me, what I stand for, and my beloved consumer. And that compass will tell me what to do, and I will play the game completely differently from everyone else. Let's go back to Hublot. Do you remember the positioning of Hublot? It's good to see these one-word positions, they work, right? How do you execute that? The genius of Mr. Biver is taking fusion, right? The combination of two different things doesn't, as he said, have to be any more about rubber and gold. Two contrasting things, Hublot brings them together, creates a fusion. Look at the names of the products. Shit companies call their products shit names, right? Look at, the Speedmaster and the Aqua Speedmaster and the Speed Aqua Master. That's the name of shit boring watches, right? Look at these names. The Big Bang for men, right? For the ladies, Tutti Frutti, right? Bringing together a fusion. Who do you hire as your celebrity endorser? If you're all about fusion, you find the exact opposite of fucking Roger Federer, right? Which turns out to be Diego Maradona, right? The most brilliant footballer of all time, broke all kinds of rules. He's the least likely person you'd ever see endorsing a watch. The fusion of unexpected. You use it for product development. Hublot spent millions of euros developing an alloy called Magic Gold. Rather than using gold for their watches, they use a combination of ceramic and gold. Why would they produce an alloy rather than using the pure material? Fusion. Don't do pure materials if you're Hublot. You create fusions. And then there's this, the single greatest piece of advertising in the history of the world, at least in my opinion. You've all seen completely standardized, generic shit advertising, okay? I'm not saying this is bad for the brand, I'm just saying it's category advertising, right? You get a guy that no one hates, Roger Federer, right? No one is inspired by Roger Federer. If you came up to me after and said, I'm inspired by Roger Federer, I'd say, you're fucking crazy, get out of here, right? He's thoroughly 5 on any 10-point scale, right? Delightful, lovely man, I love to, next door neighbor, terrific. There's Roger, how you going, Roger? Nice to see you, mate, how you going? Does he inspire me? Not at all. He's a lovely, boring guy, right? Someone with low negatives, right? Again, roll up his sleeve, go, hey, look at me, I've got the watch on. That's it. That's the formula of the category. And it happens again and again and again forever. That's how you sell a watch, if you think you're part of the watch category, yeah? But if you break the category and say, never mind that, what are we? We're fusion, you do it differently. So, about 4 years ago, Bernie Ecclestone, who's the CEO of Formula One, or was until he sold it recently, was coming out of his apartment in London, and a guy was waiting for him. Bernie was wearing the King Power watch, one of the most expensive Hublot watches. Apparently this guy had folded him home, was waiting for him. When Bernie came out of his apartment, he tried to steal Bernie's watch. Bernie, despite not being the tallest man and in his 80s, put up a fight. So the guy had to beat him unconscious to get the watch. And it made quite a few headlines. And even worse, he gave Bernie a proper beating. This was a severe incident, yeah? Now, Mr. Eggleston has a good sense of humor, and he knows Mr. Beaver. So, as they were taking the crime photographs to show all the damage, Mr. Eggleston said, give me one of those photographs. And he wrote on the back of the picture, look what some people will do to get their hands on an Hublot, and sent it to Mr. Beaver in Geneva. Mr. Beaver got that at the start of December, took one look at the photograph and went, this is our Christmas advertising campaign. And this is the ad that appeared, full page, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, China Daily. Now, most of you in this room perhaps find this distasteful. Good, you'd never buy a Hublot anyway. This is disruptive, is it not? Yes? But it's also consistent. To fusion. What could be a better brand story than the poorest man in London beating up the richest man in London over an Hublot watch? And, you know, probably statistically, there's about 10% of you in this room who are aroused by this, who've suddenly gone, I wonder if there's a Hublot boutique in Sydney, I might just peruse that, right? 90% of you are just bemused by it or offended, right? But the 10% who are aroused, we gotcha. Now, great minds think alike. Remember I talked to you before about Byron Sharp. The thing that Sharp's great at with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute is saying, look, I don't think differentiation is often possible, but this idea of distinctiveness is. And the way that the Ehrenberg Bass Institute have pushed distinctiveness is through these distinctive brand assets. Simply be true to yourself. Yeah? Make sure you stand out. Make sure you represent yourself. Now, meanwhile, while Byron was coming up with this great stuff, I was working in Paris for LVMH for many years, discovering exactly the same thing, working with all their luxury brands. Exactly the same, literally the same stuff during the same period of time. We just called it something different. In the fashion industry, we call it codes. Distinctive assets. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Your logo is a code. But if you're a strong brand, if you're well managed, you have other distinctive assets, graphical images or colors that belong to you. They're often linked to your heritage. They belong to you, not the whole category. And a surefire test is a loyal client will spot it and go, c'est ça. They know you without the logo. They recognize that little flourish, that little graphical emblem. Now, you can recognize these. Does anyone recognize this particular code? Which brand? Easy. This brand? Hermes. This brand? Ferrari. This brand? Apple. It's the only non-luxury one I've got. This brand? Veuve Clicquot. Very good. This brand? Dom Perignon. None of these are the logos. They're just abstract images. But they're part of the symbolic vocabularies of these brands, and they're phenomenally and strategically very useful to us. Make no mistake. Let me give you one example. Yeah? Most advertising is a total waste of time because it spends 85 out of the 90 seconds just talking shit and has no distinctive assets in it at all. And where Byron is absolutely right and where you can make a huge leap forward is if you can control those pixels in your advertising, you codify the shit out of them to the point where you think you've overdone it, right? Look at these ads here. Anyone recognize brand A? Which perfume brand? Yeah, no idea. Mont Blanc. Brand B, anyone got it? No, fucking hopeless. Brand C? No. Brand D? Now, either you're idiots or this is very, very hard, right? What do you think? It's very hard, right? They made it hard. All of these beautiful brands have lovely codes, and yet they're not being used because the brand or the agency or both of them aren't codifying it completely. Now, it's possible. Let me give you some better examples. Anyone recognize this brand? Kenzo. How do you know it's Kenzo? Code, code, code. Lacquer red, a code of Kenzo, yeah? An Asian in Paris, a code of Kenzo, yeah? The poppy, a code of Kenzo. No one's saying that's not beautiful, but it's codified and it belongs to Kenzo and it speaks to the client. You don't even need the pack shot to recognize it. Here's another one. Which brand? Armani. Silly question. How do you know it's Armani? There's two clues. First, there's a giant fucking picture of Giorgio Armani. Second, underneath it is written, it's mine, yeah? This is the level of obviousness that I like to see in communications. No one's saying that's not beautiful or aspirational, but the point is it's codified as well. Now, let's get on to the nitty-gritty. And here we are in Australia, a codeless fucking country, yeah? Photographs, last week, 4 of the leading fashion brands of Australia. Which is which? I've obviously taken out the logos. Let me give you some help. It's one of those. I'll give you 1 second to identify 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're clearly very distinctive, as you can tell. Yeah, you ready? Here's the correct answers. Okay, here's the answers. No? No, I'm fucking with you. No, I'm still fucking with you. You don't fucking know and neither do I. Nobody knows. They all look the same. Sydney Airport, $50. Look at those stores. Prime airport real estate, they look exactly the same. Down to the 25% off stickers. Prime real estate. Have you noticed? Look at the fucking logos. Have you noticed something? I haven't looked for a specific time. These are they're actual logos, right? The prominent logo off image search. Have you noticed something? Let me give you a further clue. Even the logos are pretty much interchangeable. David Jones, Maya. It takes rare skill to spend hundreds of millions of dollars refitting department stores to make them look exactly the fucking same. Exactly the fucking same. When you come out on Burke Street in Melbourne, I don't think most customers know which one they came out of because they look the same, don't they? Completely code-free. There's only one brand in Australia, in my opinion, that is a visual merchandising champion. Anyone recognize this boutique? He's a fucking genius, right? And if we were in any country except Australia where no one appreciates geniuses like him, if he was a Frenchman, he would be celebrated, streets would be named after him. He's a brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur and visual merchandiser. Let's move on. 2 more to go. Brand architecture, big problem for us. So I live in Tasmania now because I'm married to a Tasmanian. And every Christmas, we get together, all the Tasmanian friends in Tassie for a Tasmanian Christmas spectacular. We drink Tasmanian wine, eat Tasmanian food. And last year, we went to a couple that I won't tell you the name of because it's getting filmed. Very good friends of my wife, right? And this is their actual house. I guess there's no fucking point because they're going to see that house on the camera, but never mind, I didn't think of that. So anyway, we're at this house, okay? We're at this very nice, it's a beautiful house, having 6 people together, 3 couples. And this is the living room, and this is the bathroom for reasons that will become clear later, right? So we're having dinner in this living room, and beautiful. It was a beautiful evening. The sun's going down over the hill, and it was perfect. And then one of the guests said, I need to use the restroom. And the host pointed to a door literally 2 meters from the dining room, okay? This photograph's taken from almost where the toilet door is, right? So this poor woman had to get up, walk, 1, 2, 3, close the door, and as we say in France, take a shit, right? The rest of us are sitting there at the dining table, a bit mortified, because we're 3 meters away from someone using a toilet. There's a tiny piece of Tasmanian oak between us and someone defecating, right? Now, even worse, this poor woman, when she's finished, at some point she's got to come out, right? She's got to open the door and go like, ta-da, you know? Back from the shit house, here I am, right? And this happened again and again all night. Why did it happen? Because this anonymous couple that we won't mention the name of designed their own home. Now, if they'd hired an architect, the first thing the architect would have said to them is, you need to keep your shit house away from your dining table. This is brand architecture. Not the nature of the brands themselves. The proximity to each other or keeping them far apart is a huge art. How many rooms in your house? And should the rooms be linked together or should they be kept apart? It doesn't sound very important, but look how it ruins a house and it ruins companies. Now we use a traditional spectrum to work this out. All the way from a branded house, everything's one brand, to sub-branding, Ford Mondeo, to endorsers, where the product brand now gets more of the equity, all the way to house of brands, where the corporate brand LVMH disappears, and all you see is the product brand. Now, obviously, what's going on here is the role of the parent brand is becoming less important. Something else is going on. The need for marketing competency is increasing exponentially. And most Australian companies don't have the marketing skill and core competence to manage multiple brands, even though they think they do. I think Wesfarmers is the only organization that's properly able to do this without fucking it up. And even worse, in Australia, we have this crazy belief that the more brands you have, the more successful you're going to be. Not only is that not true, it's complete inverse from true. Less brands equals more success, as long as you're not driven just by volumes. Look at our track record. All of these stories have the same key lesson, yeah? Too many fucking brands. And look, they're fine companies with fine brands and fine people, but they tried to juggle 10, 20, 200 brands. And the problem with juggling is, if you can't juggle, you don't just drop one ball, you drop all of them. And that's been the story of Billabong, Pac Brands, Foster's when it was run by Australians, and Goodman Fielder. One of my heroes is Alan Mulally, the now retired CEO of Ford. And Alan Mulally tells this great story of the day he signed up as CEO at Ford. And at the time, Ford was a house of brands. And he said it was one of the nicest days of his life. He's an engineer. And Alan said he got to try out all the different cars to see what would be his company car. He said it was a brilliant morning, just as well. Because then he went upstairs to discover he would have to announce very shortly that Ford was about to lose $17 billion. And as he says in his simple, humble way, you don't get to make that announcement very often before you stop making any announcements at all. And it's what Mulally does next that makes him special. He sells off Land Rover and Jaguar to Tata Motors, Aston Martin to private equity, shuts down Volvo, gets rid of Mercury, thinks about selling Lincoln to the Chinese, but essentially takes Ford back from a house of brands to a branded house. Why does he sell off or get rid of these brands for a fraction of the prices he paid for them when he's losing so much money already? He does it so he can start making money again. Now here's the key point for idiot Australian CEOs, and by God, you've got one probably running your company, yeah? If you want to measure the success of a company by sales, Mulally fails. Because Ford never made the same revenues in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11 that they made in 2006. If you want to measure success by revenue, that was the great year. My point to you is, who cares? Profit. Profit. And when we follow the profit signpost, it invariably points in a very similar direction to the brand signpost. It's the sales volume signpost that throws us off. This is my favorite animal, Rattus norvegicus, the brown rat. It's a great article in Nature about 4 years ago about why Rattus norvegicus is so successful in every part of the world. You're only right now 5 or maybe 6 meters away from a rat, yeah? They're everywhere on the planet. Why? For a simple, ghoulish reason. The brown rat practices infanticide. It eats its own babies, okay? Let me show you a video. It's not pleasant, but no, I'm fucking with you, I'm fucking with you. Even I wouldn't do that. So the brown rat has, on average, 4 litters a year, okay? 4 litters a year. The dam rat, the mother rat, has 4 litters. Average is 6 pups. In a typical litter, she will pick out the weakest runt in the litter and she'll eat it. And typically, she'll eat half of her babies. It's a grotesque thing to do. Why does she do it? It is essential to the success of the rat, who only has 2 directives. Number 1, she must live to breed again. Number 2, her pups must be raised so as many of them as possible can live and grow and breed again. Now, what is the point of this horrible story before we go for our hors d'oeuvres? 2 reasons. Turn the mother rat into your company. Turn the pups into your sub-brands or your products. Too many brands suckling at the corporate teat will kill everything. That's the story of Australian branding. Learn to kill. Moronic brand consultants create brands for companies. I come along with a big fucking kitchen knife and I kill them. You know why? Because everybody makes more money at the end of that. Yeah? Learn to kill. Killing is good. No, killing is good. These are not people, these are brands. Kill them. Kill as many as you can and focus your organization, because everyone's doing it, apparently, except Australian companies. Everyone here is a Buddhist. We think all life is good, all brands should be supported. Horseshit. It's the wrong god for the decade we're going into. We need to worship Shiva, or rather Shiva's wife, right? Killing is good because it is rebirth. Learn to kill your brands. It is the Australian mistake. Killing brands for clients is a good thing. Final, and we'll finish. Brand tracking. So this handsome fella is Neil McElroy. And Neil McElroy has one claim to fame. Well, two actually, because he ran NATO for a while. But before he ran NATO in the 1960s, Neil McElroy, wait for this, invented brand management. On a wet April morning in Cincinnati in 1931, he looked at a soap powder brand and another soap powder brand, and when we've got this wrong, we're managing it by category, and he sat around at a typewriter and he wrote this, the McElroy Memo. And he laid out a new role called a brand man. There were no women back then, that's how long ago it was. A brand man who would manage a brand, okay? There were women, this weren't working in P&G, I think, right? A brand man. And that document remains still a fundamental description of brand management to this day. It's still far better than most Australian brand management structures, in my opinion. And right down on page 2 is item E. Keep whatever records are necessary and make whatever field studies are necessary to determine whether the plan has produced the expected results. The morning when brand management was invented, tracking, research was part of it. And yet, I travel around this country and I meet marketing directors and brand managers, and the first thing I say to them, when I say to my MBAs, I'm going to see you in 5 years' time, the first question, they know I'm going to fucking ask it, where's your brand tracking? Show me your data that measures your brand equity for the last 12 months. Show me your tracking. Never mind your fucking advertising and all that crap. I want to see your product, that's very nice. Where's your fucking tracking? Yeah? And I get it 1 in 10. I'm not asking for too much. In the last 12 months, I need to see a measure of brand awareness, brand image, positives, negatives, a perceptual map, standard shit. It costs you $15,000 to do that if you know what you're doing and not get ripped off by research companies. 1 in 10. And that ratio is not improving. You are not a brand manager, according to the man who invented it, unless you've got some kind of brand health or brand tracker. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Show me your data. Or you're not a brand manager. You're just fucking around in the role with a business card. I can't show you brand tracking for my clients because it's obviously very sensitive. I was doing it this morning, right? For one of the 5 biggest brands in Australia by ad spend. I mean, work out who it is. We were looking at tracking this morning. I can't show you that for reasons that will be clear. Here's a publicly available one that I can show you, right? This is hardcore good, yeah? It's one of about 15 annual metrics that Tourism Victoria runs from a representative sample of domestic Australian tourists, in this case measuring the attribute of stylish. Which of these cities is the most stylish? And as you can see, we see the green of Melbourne triumphing over the pink of Sydney and all that other no-name shit at the bottom there, right? But don't look at that. Don't look at that. Look at that x-axis, yeah? Look at it. That is a brilliantly managed brand. For 10 years, they're still doing it, for 10 or 15 years, they have had a strategy and a measurement system to direct their approach. And it's working, yeah? Go back to 2013 was the year where for domestic tourism, Melbourne for the first year beat Sydney. And there's nothing fucking there, right? There's no opera house, it's raining there today, there's nothing there. It's just better marketed than Sydney. You need to track brand. But here's why most Australian companies don't have it. You ready? Not because tracking's hard. Think what you have to do brand tracking. First, you have to have a target customer, not a swirling vortex of millennial horseshit. Second, you have to have a tight positioning, one you can actually measure, yeah? Not 800 arbitrary words inside a rhomboid. You need a strategy, not a bunch of tactical hoo-ha focusing on, various different media. You have to actually have a strategy in place. You have to understand that brand equity is in the consumer, not in the list of fonts. And finally, you have to have had your shit together for more than 12 months, something which is in short supply around Australian brand management, right? In they come, out they come, in they come, out they come. You've got to have a longitudinal, long-term, greater than 12-month strategy. And that's why brand tracking is the ultimate signal of success. And why I say to my MBA students, when I come knocking, when you ask me to come and see you when you're older and fatter and richer, the first question, even in front of your boss, will be, you know what I want to see? Show it to me. Show it to me right now. I'll sign the NDA. Give it to me. Give it to me. Show it to me. Tracking is the ultimate signal that you know what you're doing. So, brand management deconstructed. I don't think it's asking too much. And it's as much about what isn't there as what is there. It's not easy, but it is relatively straightforward. What is the perfectly managed brand? It's a number of things. First, it's a brand that's not afraid to play its origins, both micro and macro. Second, it's a company that's gone and already killed all the brands that they don't need, that's been actually quite cruel about it and said, we're only going to play the brands we need. And we've killed the ones we don't. We've focused our resources on the healthy potential pups. 3, it's a manager that understands how brands are built and also how they're broken by the overuse of sales promotion. 4, it's a tight position that doesn't need PowerPoint or a brand book for you to tell me what the positioning is, the ultimate test. 5, it's a brand that's happy to be disruptively consistent to its position in terms of execution. 6, and this is a hard one, it codifies the crap out of everything. The windows of Australian retail, with the exception of a few notable brands, including Telstra, aren't codified. They're just pieces of glass that you look through to look at the products, yeah? Codification, to the point where you think you're overdoing it. I can't tell you some of my experiences with clients. The best clients I've worked for around the world are so worried that they've overdone the codes. They think, listen, it's getting a bit obvious. If you have that worry, we're in the right place. The customer doesn't fucking notice. It could be bleeding out of your ears before they notice these codes. Trust me, overplay them, overplay them. And finally, a tracker. Just once a year that you look at and you do something. You learn from it. And you change your strategy and you adjust and you track again and you learn and you get better. And you improve and you build stronger brands as a result. Thank you.